Have you ever invited someone over for something as simple as a cup of tea, only for the afternoon to become an unforgettable memory? That's exactly what happened to me, and to this day, I feel a slight tingling in my fingertips when I remember it. Before I tell you everything, I'd love to know where you're listening to me from. Where in the world are you right now? What city surrounds you as you listen to this story? It comforts me to imagine curious faces on distant streets, attentive to a piece of my soul. It was a cool spring afternoon in our quiet coastal town. The sun filtered timidly through gray clouds, tinting my small herb garden with silver. At 58, I had learned to savor the daily rituals, watering the rosemary, lining up the wicker chairs on the terrace, carefully setting the table. That day, I had set out a tray with 2 cups, a teapot of mint tea, and a plate of homemade almond cookies. Humble pleasures. I wasn't anticipating anything out of the ordinary. Mateo, my son Javier's friend, had helped me with some heavy boxes earlier this week. He's 27, courteous, with a serenity that inspires trust. He reminded me of Javier in his younger days, before he moved across the ocean. Open, inquisitive, but with an invisible weight on his chest that he rarely let go of. I sent him a thank you message and, as a simple gesture, invited him for a cup of tea. He accepted with a speed that surprised me, suggesting he come over that same afternoon. I watched him approach along the gravel path, his steps firm but measured, his hands buried in his jacket pockets, his eyes lowered as if the twisted olive trees along the path held secrets. I greeted him with a warm smile, hoping to dispel any shadows. He raised his gaze and reciprocated, although a slight tremble appeared on his lips. We settled onto the terrace, where the chairs still held the warm embrace of the sun. The kettle whistled softly as it poured the infusion. The steam rose like wisps of mist between us. Mateo cupped his hands around the cup, but didn't drink immediately. His eyes wandered around the garden, the old wooden swing, the lavender beds, and then settled on me, steady, searching. I tried to keep my tone light. You seem thoughtful today. Is everything okay? I asked. He took a deep breath, exhaled slowly. I didn't come just for the tea, he finally admitted, his voice deep but clear. There's something I've been wanting to tell you, something I didn't know how to express. His words hung in the air, fragile and thick like the vapor that separated us. My pulse quickened. I didn't know what was coming, an apology, a dilemma, some kind of mess he'd gotten himself into. I clasped my hands in my lap and nodded, inviting him to continue, while I tried hard to appear calm. I admire you so much, he began. More than you know. These past few months, you've been like a beacon for me. His fingers tightened on the cup. I don't have many people I can truly talk to, who listen without judgment. You've been that light. A wave of warmth and melancholy washed over me. In his gaze, I saw a young man caught on the threshold of 2 lives, longing to be heard, to be seen. Mateo, I murmured softly. I had no idea you felt this way. I'm glad you trust me. He gave a short, almost incredulous laugh. It's more than that, he retorted. I didn't know how to tell you this without being disrespectful to you or Javier, but I think I've started to develop feelings for you. The orchard seemed to freeze in that instant. Even the wind stopped swaying the wind chimes. Her revelation wasn't what I expected. It stole my breath. I gripped my mug, feeling its warmth against my palms, and searched for balance. There was no arrogance on his face, only raw truth, even fragility. I chose my words carefully. You share so much, I whispered, and so brave. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from that feeling of venturing into unknown lands where sincerity and respect weighed more than any map. Mateo looked down. I don't expect anything, he said. I just couldn't keep it in any longer. We remained silent for a long moment, enveloped in the scent of mint and toasted almonds. I felt an unexpected tenderness well up, not only for him, but for myself, for the existence I had patiently woven, for the courage it takes at any age to bare one's soul. The terrace became a tiny island, out of time, and we were 2 castaways on it, navigating a delicate but authentic moment. I reached out and lightly touched his hand, a gesture of comfort. Thank you for telling me, I said. Let's stay here a little longer, just breathing. Whatever this means. We'll find out later. He nodded and his shoulders relaxed a bit. The brew had cooled, but something else had come alive. The air, the silence, the space where words no longer needed to justify themselves. The next day, the garden looked refreshed. A night rain had sprinkled the leaves with drops like tiny pearls. As I went out to get the mail, I relived her words again and again. They weren't impulsive or rehearsed. They came from a pure place, and that made them inescapable. I poured myself a coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the steam rise. The house felt too silent, heavy with echoes. I hadn't responded to his confession beyond that oasis on the terrace. After finishing the infusion, we lapsed into a comfortable silence, and then he stood up to leave. He smiled faintly, thanked me for the cookies, and walked down the path with that slow, deliberate gait. I watched him leave, debating whether to call him or let him go. Now, hours later, the echo of what I'd experienced lingered like an elusive perfume. Toward mid-afternoon, I couldn't stand being locked away with my thoughts any longer. I tidied the living room, lined up the books on the low table, and put on a light shawl. The sky had cleared, and the smell of damp earth mingled with that of lavender wafting through the open windows. Javier had been gone for years. My ex-husband and I had separated even before that. My life was serene but lonely. Perhaps that's why Mateo's arrival had shaken me so much. It was a reminder that someone saw me beyond just the friendly neighbor. At 4, my phone vibrated. A message from Mateo. Thanks for listening to me yesterday. Could we chat again, if you feel comfortable? I read it twice. His tone was cautious, reverent, leaving all the initiative to me. After a moment, I replied, I'll come at 5. We'll sit in the garden. When he arrived, the air was warm, scented by the rain on the stones. He had set up the small iron table under the ancient olive tree, with a teapot of rooibos between us. He seemed a little less tense than the day before, although his eyes still scanned mine, as if gauging my mood. He sat down opposite me, his palms resting on the table. Thanks for having me, he murmured. I barely slept a wink last night. I thought I'd messed everything up. You didn't mess anything up, I replied, my voice softer than I'd intended. You were honest. That takes courage, she exhaled and nodded slightly. I just needed you to know how I feel, even if it doesn't go any further. You've been kind to me, and I didn't want this to turn into resentment or entanglement. I stirred my infusion slowly, watching the leaves swirl. Mateo, I said, you're much younger than me. My life is in a different phase. What you said threw me, but it also touched me. It reminded me that I'm still visible, that I'm still here. She looked at me with an open expression. I don't see you as just Javier's mother. I see you as a person, someone who cares, who understands. That's rare. The purity of her voice shook my chest, but a protective instinct also arose within me, a desire to protect us from hasty decisions we might regret. I appreciate what we have, I replied carefully. I don't know what it is yet, but if you want, we can continue talking about life, about whatever you need. No rush, he smiled, relieved. I'd like that. We stood there, sipping rooibos, the sun filtering in dappled rays through the olive branches. The orchard buzzed with lazy bees. There was no more urgency, only the serene awareness that something had changed between us. Not a leap into the void, but a half-open door to a deeper understanding. As he said goodbye that evening, he paused at the gate and turned around. Thank you, he said, for not closing the door on me. I stood on the terrace, my hands clasped around my empty cup, watching him walk down the street. A strange mixture of peace and anticipation bubbled inside me, as if my world had tilted toward a new horizon. I didn't know where he was going, but I felt alive, awake in a way I hadn't been in years. The olive leaves fell like pale confetti along the path of his steps. The days passed, and Mateo's visits became a subtle rhythm in my predictable routine. He never insisted, never intruded. He came, sometimes with a book he thought I'd like, other times with a story about his day or a funny anecdote from the bus. I began to look forward to those afternoons, like one waits for the slow unfolding of a capricious flower. One late afternoon, I found him waiting for me at the gate. The sky was a canvas of roses and golds, and the scent of jasmine climbed over the fence. His hands were in his pockets, but a new unease in his shoulders alerted me. He was carrying something heavy on his soul. "May I come in?" he asked. I nodded, stepping aside. He walked through the rosemary and olive trees with measured steps, like someone preparing for a storm. I led him to the terrace, where a teapot of mint was quietly steaming on the table. "I've been reflecting," he began, his voice wavering, "on what you said, that there's no rush, that we can just talk. I want to honor that." He paused, looked at the infusion, then at me, but I also can't deny what I feel. I felt a knot in my chest, the air heavy with suspended promises. "Mateo," I replied softly. "Feelings aren't ignored, but they must be cared for. That's the tricky part. Truth and respect hand in hand." He nodded, swallowing. "I know, sometimes I can't stop thinking about you. It's not a passing thing, it's constant. I didn't mean to overwhelm you, but it's real." I took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the mug ground me. "You're not a burden. Sharing this is trust, and that's worth gold." The sun was setting, dyeing the terrace amber and carmine. We stood still, letting the silence expand. I realized my heart was responding in unexpected ways. Tenderness, curiosity, a bond that erased the distances of age. It wasn't a raging fire, but a profound recognition. Two souls seeing each other without masks. Finally, Mateo broke the spell. "Can I stay a little longer just talking?" "Nothing more," I smiled, exhaling relief. "Of course. That's exactly what I wish for." He leaned back in his chair, relaxing, and told me a story from work that made me laugh out loud. In that laughter, the tension evaporated, giving way to a fluid intimacy. I saw him differently, not just as my son's friend, nor as a dazzled young man, but as someone whose openness had opened a door I didn't even know I was guarding. The orchard held its breath, the olive leaves shining in the twilight. Time flowed differently there, slower, fuller, more attentive. I noticed details with quiet delight. The curve of her smile, the sparkle in her eyes, the way the breeze played in the branches. Each nuance brought a serene joy, a rediscovery I'd forgotten. When he left, the sky was a deep indigo. He lingered at the gate, looking at me with a mixture of hope and decorum. "Thank you," he repeated softly, "for allowing me to be honest." I waved my hand, deeply grateful for her entrance into my world. As I closed the door, I realized that what had begun as a simple invitation for a cup of tea had become vast. A refuge where vulnerability, honesty, and mutual respect intertwined, creating an unexpected bond. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It vibrated with promise. For the first time in a long time, I felt like the best in life could still blossom. The afternoons became a tapestry of conversations in the garden, warm cups in each other's hands, warm words in each other's souls. Mateo's initial restlessness had softened into something tender, almost brotherly, but with a deeper nuance. We didn't define, we didn't accelerate. We simply inhabited that interval between truth and faith. And I discovered that this limbo can be the richest core of any bond. One evening, as the sun set behind the olive tree, I watched him from the terrace. He was laughing at a story of mine, his head thrown back, his eyes crinkled with amusement. There was a warmth about him, untouched by ages or past mistakes, by the barriers that life erects. He was a mere presence, and in that presence, I recognized myself, him, the rare and fragile beauty of authenticity. "Do you ever think about tomorrow?" he asked suddenly in a thoughtful, calm tone. I looked at him, surprised. "Constantly," I admitted, "but not like before. I don't make feverish plans anymore. I focus on the now, on the people who matter, on the life I choose day by day." He nodded, gazing at the garden. "Me too. I've wasted years pretending to be who others expected. But with you, I feel like I can breathe deeply." I reached out and gently touched her hand. "Then inhale," I whispered. "Stay in the present. That's what's essential. Not the labels, not the rules, not the demands. Just this truth, this laughter, this trust." He smiled, that soft, unashamed smile that was already a part of me. "You make it sound easy," he said, his voice light, like a sincere compliment. The air smelled of jasmine and damp earth. The garden murmured with life, as if embracing our unusual company. The light filtered through the leaves, outlining the wrinkles on my face, the silver threads in my hair. A life lived to the fullest. I felt seen, not just looked at, but deeply understood. We spent hours there, exchanging stories, pauses, and thoughts. Without pressure, without burdens, just a constant pulse of respect and subtle affection. And in that rhythm, I found an unexpected gift, a rebirth of the self, an echo that connections arrive at any time, in unexpected ways. And yet, they reinvent the heart. As he said goodbye, the sky was a blanket of midnight. He paused at the gate, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on mine with quiet intensity. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me be me with you." I smiled, a warmth welling up from within, oblivious to the sun or the tea. "And thank you," I replied, "for letting me be me too." As he walked away down the path, I slowly closed the gate, savoring the peace that followed. The orchard was silent but not alone. The olive leaves gleamed in the moonlight, and I knew that life surprises us with moments of openness, sweetness, and emotional connection when we least expect it. I poured myself a last cup of tea, the steam dancing in the evening breeze, and sat on the terrace. For the first time in years, I felt fully alert, grounded in the now, and brimming with gratitude for a young man's honesty and the gentle ways he had brightened my horizon. Those sunsets, that tender, rare trust, would always be with me. In the stillness, I smiled to myself. Life at 58 was far from predictable, and that, after all, was its greatest charm.